Hey there, and welcome to episode number 87 of Killer POV. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob G. from Icons of Fright.
Happy New Year, Rob.
Happy New Year to all of us.
To Elric Kane from Inside Horror and owner of the Chump Cut Cafe. Happy New Year.
Happy
New Year to Rebekah McKendry.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So can I say Happy New Year?
You can say Happy New Year.
Our guest can say Happy New Year, Mr. Jeff Lieberman.
But what about people listening? If I say Happy New Year, what is today's date?
January? It's the 7th.
And tomorrow will be this will air on the 8th.
tomorrow.
Yeah, this will air on the 8th.
January 8th.
It'll air on the 9th. It
airs on the 9th.
Yeah, so that's still legit, right?
What's the window? What's the
When do we stop saying Happy New Year?
Yeah, when do we stop with the Happy New Year?
I say a week and a half into the new year for people you haven't seen yet. Like I walked in and saw Brian here at the studio, and I said Happy New Year because I haven't seen him.
And then do you only get one? Like when you see him again, you know,
you
say,
can't.
No,
that's just creepy.
It's just it's weird.
I feel like the
Then
first.
you're just the Happy New Year
You
guy.
already Happy New Year me.
Yeah.
What are you doing with the Happy New Year?
That's desperation in this town. But I feel like it's the first. I feel like the first is a golden time to say that to people. After that, once you're at the 8th or the 13th and somebody says Happy New Year, you've already lost any of those New Year's resolutions are gone.
Right.
You've already got a broken spirit back into the next year. I don't know.
So wait, what was your New Year's resolutions, guys?
Wear colored socks.
Yeah,
That was the other one.
I make the same one every year.
What's that?
And I keep it. I'm the only person that could keep it, to not make any New Year's resolutions.
Probably a good one.
I stick to it year after year.
But I thought
And
you
you
also
never
did
disappointed.
no podcasts. So that's one of your resolutions. We're breaking.
That wasn't a resolution. That was just, like a house rule. No
Okay, fair.
podcast. So
That's fair. We're going to
so
shatter
we gotta
one.
call this something. Let's call it something else.
Yeah,
Breaking
okay.
some resolutions here.
That's true. I
Like
wonder
it.
where that name even gets coined.
Pod.
Podcast, where the first podcast. It is a weird name.
Yeah.
One of
for
our fans is going to
shows
send
this.
us like a Wikipedia page that explains everything.
Okay, sure enough.
Do the work for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So does it bother you that you said 3 people said Happy New Year to you
Yeah,
today?
it bothers me.
you, right?
Yeah, it's annoying.
Would that happen in New York or just LA, you think? This late?
That's a good question. It seems like it would be an LA thing.
Yeah.
It's like in New York, at this point, it's Happy New Year. Fuck you. What, Chinese New Year?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I think also in LA, I think a lot of people disappear and leave the city for a long time, then only just get back around the 10th. You know?
Yes.
That's true.
So that for them, that's the new year, you know?
Right.
I'm still getting bounce
Industry
back
news.
messages, which shocks me because, like, I spend so much of my day emailing people in the studio system, and I get bounce back messages that
Out
say,
of the
like,
office.
"Yeah,
Still.
I'm out of the office
Long
until the
vacation.
15th," and I'm like, "Who lets you do that, man?
Unbelievable.
That's crazy."
Unbelievable. But we're super glad to have Jeff on board because we've mentioned your film several times throughout the course of the show, and our fans are big fans as well. And we always thought if we could line it up, if you were in town, we would definitely want to have you on. And I think it's fascinating because a few things I discovered this week from talking on the phone with you is you were born in Brooklyn originally, but then you lived out here for a while. Was it
I was born in Brooklyn, and then I was from Long Island,
Long Island?
Long
That's
Island.
right.
5 towns. In fact, I graduated with Donna Karen.
Huh.
And the guy that did all the Meatloaf, who's the guy? He's a great writer and producer.
Who's that? The Steinman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steinman.
Yeah.
I had like this really amazing graduating class.
And also, didn't Adam West have a giant house in Hewlett, if I'm not mistaken? That was
Adam West?
Yeah, Adam West, Batman.
He did?
I thought he did. It's got his initials on and everything. We used to drive him on the
Because of
board.
initials.
Well, no, because he graduated from Hewlett High School. I used to work at the dairy barn in Hewlett. So, for all I know, I may have served Jeff milk at one
I
point.
think so.
What's
yeah.
a dairy barn?
Dairy barn is a drive-through grocery store.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before.
As a
Oh, yeah,
matter of
he
fact-
has.
You
I
did.
remember that.
Okay, because I remember saying, how does it work? Like, do you just pull up and be like, reduced fat Triscuits, please?
No, they
and
have the
like
cow
give
right
them to
there,
you.
and then you grab the other.
For real.
Drive-through cowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were in Long Island, and you went to the School of Visual Arts.
Yep.
So, I mean, one of the things we always talk about with people that's always fascinating is obviously to be a filmmaker, you have to love films and have an appreciation for them. What was it for you in the beginning? How did you first start seeing movies, like things that, especially like genre movies, like what had an impact on you? Was it stuff you saw on TV? Did you go to the theater all the time?
No, actually, the only Valley Stream with Frank Henenlotter, actually same age, and he was from Rockville Center. It was like I didn't know him, but we would go to the same theaters, same matinees to see the Incredible Shrinking Man, Them, It, Godzilla, all those. That's what I was into.
Right.
But just movies in general, not at all.
Interesting.
And then when I started dating, got older, this was my line to girls. Like, what do you want to do? Anything but a movie. And the reason, I'm a very pragmatic person, especially when you want to get laid. And that was like, okay, your parents want you home at like 1 or even 12 o'clock when I was really young. We're going to go at 8 o'clock and spend 2 net hours in the dark looking at the screen and not talking to each other. So I didn't talk about the sex part, but it's like, it's irrational. Like, you can do that. What do you need me there for?
Oh, that could be a good setup, because you could be like, I just want to talk to you for 2 hours. Which if someone said to me, I'd be like, swoon.
But that's the implication. I didn't put it the way I'm putting it. I didn't say what I really want to be doing, but I said, I wanted to get to know you and all that stuff. So movies out.
Swoon.
Wow.
Let's reenact this. Go
ahead.
I always did most of that in the movie theaters myself.
Well, drive-ins.
Drive-ins. I missed that.
That's a whole other. You want to go to drive-in? Let's go.
Now you're down, a little privacy.
Did you guys have a lot of drive-ins in Long Island?
We had the Sunrise Drive-In, which was
oh my God,
huge. Everybody, it was the only one, so they came from all of the 5 boroughs.
Wow.
And it was amazing to have, like, when I was a little kid, we'd go up on the fence and watch it for free, because you could hear it coming out of the cars, because they had those little speakers on the windows. And but it's no longer there.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
In fact, you just brought up a vague memory, because I remember them tearing it down and making it into just a regular movie theater.
Yeah,
that I remember from my childhood, when it just became a multiplex. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
We still have, like, the one in my hometown there's actually 2 really close together in my hometown, and they're both still there. But, like, for the longest stretch, we didn't even have a real theater. We just had those drive-ins. So, yeah, that's like my childhood. I would so cry if they ever tore those down.
Yeah.
So.
I wonder if you did a reality show. I just thought of it as like, how many children were conceived at a drive-in? I mean, are they cinephiles? I mean, it'd be interesting to like round them all up, and it's got to be a lot.
I got to ask my parents, because there's a distinct possibility, because it was the only theater in town. So
you just asked them what was playing. You have a special
it was
connection
my
to that
dad,
movie.
so it was John Wayne, whatever it was. I was conceived to John Wayne.
So what were some of the I mean, and maybe you didn't have a lot of, like, I'm just curious what some of your favorite films were. What were some of the things that had an impact on you? Because the thing I like about your films are they're always kind of, I say ahead of the curve in terms of, it's always like this radical idea that you just wouldn't have thought of, but then it seems almost so obvious, like with Blue Sunshine, for example, the idea of 10 years after all these people did drugs and then the effects of that. It just seems like an idea that's so original and ahead of its time.
First of all, the thing I've heard about ahead of its time my whole life, that's not such a great thing. I mean, it sounds on the surface, it sounds like a great thing, but it's almost, if you're going to do this for a living, it's almost like saying you're so behind the times, because net, that's when somebody's passing. That's too ahead of your time. You know what I mean? And then in retrospect, boy, you were ahead of your time. Mm-hmm. So the real trick is to be on time, like something is perfect for right now. And
it seems like the very definition of a cult film is being films that were ahead of our time, and then they get caught up to which is unfortunate for you. But
it's unfortunate, and it's fortunate, because I don't want to sound like a jerk, but I have like 8 billion times more fans all over the world than I did when I made those films. And they're the next generation, which I love because it resonates to them. I don't give a shit what people my age think about anything. So when I hear the feedback that I got, like I was just in Brighton, England, and it's like it's almost like there's one fan. They wear the same T-shirts. They look like you.
He's pointing to me.
And
black T-shirts.
And they the T-shirt business with like Dawn of the Dead is like they sell a zillion of them.
Right. Yeah.
And they all are very knowledgeable about films, very really into my films, and they just speak different languages. This happened to be they spoke English, but other than that, it's like one culture. It's this pop culture of horror and sci-fi. I think it's terrific. Mm-hmm. And who the hell, when I was making these films, you're only thinking in terms of getting it finished and distributing it and getting a job of another film. If somebody, little Rumpelstiltskin guy came and said, in 40 years, they're going to be showing Blu-ray, whatever Blu-ray is, or putting. Squirm played in Lincoln Center last June.
That's awesome.
Somebody told me, I said, get the fuck out of here.
That's pretty wild.
And it was true. And it kicked off a series this past summer. The next night they showed American Psycho, which is a studio.
Yeah.
They were all studio movies, and Squirm kicked off the whole series. I'm thinking, why would you start with Squirm? Like, people go, this is horrible. I'm not going to go see the rest of them,
Wow.
But,
well, to put it in context, when you made those films, did you expect them to last in any capacity? Because I feel like in that time period, people were just making movies, getting them out there, and then it'd probably just disappear.
We didn't think in terms of anything beyond doing it and then doing it again.
But yours seemed to almost work against trends at the time. Like, while everyone else is out making a slasher film, you made a film about worms.
Yeah.
And,
Well, you could slash worms.
You can. Or while everybody's making, more of kind of exploitation films, you did it's almost a crime drama about ex-hippies.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my thing has always been like, if you can't be original, what's the point? So I always say to, I hate to tell anybody how to do anything, but when they ask, especially at colleges, I say, make a list of all the things that are out there, okay? That's the don't do list. So you have a blank piece of paper and all these things, zombies, vampires, we don't have to see zombies on a boat. It's not original. There's a line of people that can put those combinations together that goes 3 times around the planet. I figured it out. Like arm and
like
arm.
your intestine.
Yeah.
It's like Hands Across
like
America, but hands of zombie filmmakers.
So look at the blank page, and somewhere on that blank page is a fresh idea. You just have to write it.
Right.
I mean, I'm making it sound silly, but that's basically what I do is like eliminate, the fist in Just Before Dawn, the fist that goes down. The way I came up with that, I didn't say, I got a great idea of how it grows. I just said, here's a situation in real life, not in movie life. People in movies don't know they're in the movies. Bad movies, they know they're in a movie. So they do movie shit. The script, the original script, I mean, I'm jumping around, but the original script had like all movie stuff, right? That the characters just did things to service plot. But I'm saying this girl weighs 95 pounds, soaking wet. The other guy weighs like 360, and he's twice her height and everything. She has no weapons. So how's she going to kill him? Just in real life, not in movie life, right? Is she going to grab a rock in real life somewhere and conveniently slug him or something? Or is she going to shove him and he's going to fall on a... these are all movie things that never happen. It never happens. So in eliminating, or grab his machete, at the final thing, like they grab scissors. Not in real life. In movie life, there's always, they go, there's a picture frame with glass. And the hand goes out and they grab it and crack him across the head and then slice his artery. And
grab the foreshadow.
Yeah. But if you read crime scenes reports, it never happens. Yeah. It's not real life. So in eliminating all the things, the movie things, the only thing that was left is shoving a fist down his throat, because that's real. As real as if you could get your fist in there, you would suffocate somebody.
Oh,
this is amazing. And
next time you break into my house, please don't break into my house.
But
I'm still going to try that.
Take this, in order to make it believable, how am I going to, first of all, whose mouth is going to be big enough and fist can be small enough? So I had what's his name? Page, Anthony Page or something. Oh, he's going to be mad. His last name was Page. He worked with.
Look it up.
He worked with Rick Baker. He was a protege. Did the? He's a big time makeup guy now. That's why you're editing.
No one tell him that. No,
yeah, but anyway,
I'm looking it up.
He made a prosthetic mouth, and I didn't shoot it in Oregon because I knew this is a very complex thing. We're going to do it, and we did it in my backyard in New York. And, it's tight. You don't know where you are, right? And I knew the screen direction. So I said to my ID, get a girl with a small fist. as small as you can have. Get fine, small hand. So he did, and I said, "Hi, how you doing?" And she made the fist and did the thing. Do you ever watch like Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Oh, yeah.
Susie.
Yes.
It was her.
That's right. That's right. That's so funny.
It was Susie
crazy.
Essman. And
Weird.
so I actually, years and years later, I know her. So then, but I didn't know that
That's
until
amazing.
she said, somebody came up to him and said, do you remember, it was my AD. He said, do you remember that you worked with Jeff Lieberman? She says, I know Jeff Lieberman. I didn't never work with him. She said, yes, you did. So anyway,
You were the fist.
So what I'm really saying, if Larry David is listening, it was the fisting thing that launched her career. And
which is true. And that's my favorite thing about Just Before Dawn. And when it screened at the New Beverly last year, you came in town for it. I brought Darren Bowsman, who had never seen it before, and I was just waiting for that moment. And sure enough, he was like, oh, shit. This is the best freaking movie. So that was great.
Especially when she pulls the hand out, the fist out.
Yeah.
I'll give it for your audience, like, that was me. I did that in the movie. I was in the sound booth doing that.
Right.
While Greg Henry cowers.
Yeah.
I mean, that gender reversal is the
Yeah.
most fun part because
Yeah.
Greg Henry really is the damsel in distress.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
one of my favorite actors in general. He's a really great actor, but I only saw it probably about 5 years ago, and I was surprised to see him in it. I think it's a film that people have discovered quite late. A lot of our generation are only catching up to now.
And now the Blu-ray is the first time it actually looks good.
Yeah. Who put that out? Was it Code Red?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot
did a
of
great
natural
job
light.
on it.
You shot in a lot of natural light.
Yeah, well,
Oregon.
it's not so much the natural light. It's that the DP, Joel King, kept pushing things right to the edge in film. And so that's all well and good if you're in a theater and it's a bright bulb and all that. But as it went to like home video VHS, it looked half the stuff you couldn't see what was going on. You just heard it. Now it's pretty much the way it was supposed to look for the first time, really, because they did it from the negative.
It's kind of fun seeing the Blu-ray renaissance of a lot of people's films, including yours. It must feel cool seeing Squirm. I know Arrow put it out in the UK, and now Scream Factory just put it out here, but it's kind of got to be cool for you to see these movies come out looking the way they're supposed to look, finally.
Well, in that case, it's kind of easy because MGM had the movie from the beginning. It wasn't called MGM, it was AIP. AIP got bought by Orion. Orion got bought by MGM. So the vault keeps the negative all that time. And so when they struck the DVD, they took it out and I think they made a new print. They have a system, not just for that film, but for all of them. So it's going to be maximum. I had no notes. They said, we want you to prove the quality on the DVD. And I was doodling. It's like, this looks better. You have to realize, you do a low-budget movie like Halloween or Friday the 13th, you take that negative today, you're going to make it look better. Because there's things we couldn't do. Like in Squirm, you're shooting in November. So the days are 4:30, it gets dark, like dark. Sun goes down, you can't shoot. 12 noon, you got the sun overhead, and it's overhead light, and everything's bright. Now you come around to shoot a reverse angle, and it's 3:30, and they're orange. You can't un-orange them. You can only do so much in the lab back then. Now it's you can match the skin tone on the other one like perfect.
Yeah.
So the movies are saved. The low budget thing are things that bothered the hell out of me back then. You can fix.
Yeah, it's crazy.
In Blue Sunshine, there's a scene where Zalman King is in a parking lot. My DP said, we can't shoot. So what do you mean we can't shoot? He says, this is in L.A. in the summer. It was like atomic bomb city. There was nothing in the back except open space. So to get him in, properly exposed, his face, you have to blow out. The background is so blown out, and you'd have to pump so much light on his face to blind him in order to balance it out. It was impossible. I said, well, we have to shoot. And he says, well, the sun. I said, there's nothing there? Like the negatives got nothing? He says, not nothing, but you can hate it. And when you get into the lab and you do your final color correction, you're still going to hate it. And he was right. When Don, Synapse.
Yeah, Don May.
When Don May did the color correction, that's the first time I saw the digital. It was the Da Vinci. Mm-hmm. And the guy says, "Oh, this is problematic." And it brought back like acid flashbacks. Oh, that scene. I never want to see that, that parking lot. And he goes, "Oh," and he makes this like power window thing. And he goes, "Say when." And he goes, ch-ch, ch-ch, ch-ch. And right before my eyes, the background, the cars, everything, I went, "Whoa, welcome to the 2Ks." I mean, it was unbelievable. So that element of it, I think the fans, unless you went back and looked at the VHS or something like that, you wouldn't know. You don't appreciate it. But the films actually look better. And Squirm looks a lot better than it did as a release print.
And I think also people are super excited to go back to movies with these kind of practical. I mean, I look at Squirm before coming here. I put on the Blu-ray that you gave me, and I saw it on MGM a while back. And it's unbelievable the amount of worms in some of the scenes. Like when the door opens,
oh my gosh,
and they all come in, and you just think, okay, well, this is a prime example of a movie that could never be made or would never be made again because it'd all be CGI and it wouldn't have the same effect. Yeah. So I think a lot of these films, as they get rediscovered, people get so excited about that, the practical element. Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine how you worked with that much livestock. Is that are worms livestock? I don't know.
Yeah, we had a worm wrangler, and I still feel, even to this day, it's sort of like a Holocaust thing. I feel bad about, like, we killed like 300, 400,000 worms.
Wow. You've got a lot of worm ghosts on your conscience.
I'm being cremated, and there's a reason. They put me in a coffin.
That should be on the box.
The ones that go, there he is. He's the one. It's like it's Hitler.
Yeah, the ancestors come after you.
I assume that this is before, like, animal rights would have to be on set and everything.
These worms, we'd have to put a thing that these worms were not harmed. You know what we did?
These worms are fucking obliterated.
A couple of years ago, one of my friends made a film, and they were supposed to be maggots, but usually when you use maggots in films, you use like mealworms, which look similar but aren't quite maggot-y. And they, one of them died while they were shooting, like just died of, I don't know, like fucking old age or something. And they actually had to fill out paperwork and files saying that they did nothing to kill the worm, that it had just died.
What about all those fishing shows? Like you see the guys and they're putting the things.
That's reality TV. Count. That's different. We don't know. That's real.
But we had a grid in the living room of copper wire that zigzagged, and it was tied to a rheostat of electricity. So when the guy turned on the juice, the worms would go crazy. So I would say, roll sound, roll camera thing, and action on the worms. I'm like, direct, just worms, right? And the guy goes, zzz, and the worms went crazy, right? Cut. Now, a little adjustment is okay. We're going to take two. Cranks it up. They just jolted half one. Third time, they just move a little bit and smoke starts rising. Two guys with snow shovels come in, shovel them all off, and come and spread another 1,000 or 2,000.
Oh, wow.
Worms.
Oh, my God.
So there's some scientific evidence that your actual concept of the movie of electricity, that all came from...
Didn't you read the crawl at the beginning of the movie?
No, I can't remember. I don't remember the crawl.
This is an event that happened in 1976.
In Georgia?
In Georgia, in Fly Creek. Don't Google it, Fly Creek. There is a Fly Creek. It's in New York. Actually, there is a Fly Creek, but it's near Cooperstown.
And so that was the inspiration? You read that story, or?
Who's this guy?
Buy the Blu-ray.
Okay.
Watch the features.
Oh, you're joking. All right. And I think it feels real. It feels like the ultimate Georgian film next to Deliverance. I've always thought that was like the best Georgia ever looked like Georgia.
Also the most significant egg cream scene in a movie ever.
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Which
probably
is such a New York drink.
People.
No one has egg cream out here, so it's just...
Really?
Elric, start serving it a jump cut.
Second best shower scene in movies.
Second best.
After Psycho. Can't be better than Psycho, but...
Yeah.
The worms coming through a shower, that's pretty grotesque.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. A lot of that stuff, because like you mentioned, that it's practical. So you have to do things like reverse print. You know, so like if you have worms falling out of the ceiling, out of a hole in the ceiling, how do you do that? How are you going to get worms to crawl and come out? You could drop it through the hole, but you can't make them crawl out, you know, and crawl out to the side of it and then drop. Well, what you do is you make a ceiling on the floor, a fake ceiling, and then you drop the worms onto that, and then you reverse. So it looks like when you're dropping it, it looks like it's coming out.
Yeah.
Oh. It's a good thing that the front looks like the back on a worm, so you can't really tell which direction what's going.
Well, there's a line in the movie. She says, he says, Don Scardino says, how do you know, because they bite. So he says, how do you know which end is the tail or something? She says, the one opposite the end that bites.
Did they get everywhere on set, or were they so well wrangled they're only where they're meant to be, or were they kind of infesting the actual set?
Like stray worms you're talking about?
Rogues.
Well, there was a couple of them demanded their own trailers. So, you know, that was no. You know, we also had fake worms, like a lot of them, and somebody made up a special fluid, and the worms were custom made, all 3 different colors, and then they made up this thin for high speed machinery. It's so it looked slithery. So we had 500,000 of those. So all in all, to animate worms, I mean, if you can do that with worms, you can do it with anything, because basically what do worms do? They crawl. Big deal. You know, so you have to find ways to, and also personifying Roger as like the worm man. That's what transcended or metamorphosized the idea into something that you would be afraid of, a person, you know.
Was Squirm an independent feature or something that you were hired to do? It was an independent.
It was independent. I wrote it, and Lansbury Baru, Edgar Lansbury, they bought it and financed it, and then immediately it was Sam Markoff took it for the world. So they were like a studio.
So that's one case where your film was of the time, and it did really well.
Yeah,
right on release.
Yeah, I fucked up. It was like
that was the one.
It was a timely.
You Orsoned it.
Yeah, but you know, it's funny that movie would have been Columbia Pictures. The first people that saw it was Columbia, and the sales department. You know, it's like, we could sell this movie. Boom, and so they wanted to buy it, but there was a guy named David Beagleman who had to sign. He was the head of the studio, and he had to sign off on it, and it would have doubled the producer's investment like that, just on one sale. And they'd have it for the world. And I go, oh, look at that. I made my first movie, and it's a studio movie because it's a Columbia release. And it just so happened the guy was in town. Like if he just was in Florida, it would have been Columbia or something. But he was in town. And he says to his wife, I think her name was Gladys something. She was notorious, like a Hollywood wife thing. And they were going to go out somewhere. I know this because they got the report from the projectionist. You know, they don't sit there with an audience. They sit there alone. So he says, I got this movie. I got to sign off on it. Squirm. And gets to the scene where the worm goes up the side of Roger's face, which is exactly what Sam Markoff, those people said, we got to have this movie because we'll sell it just on that. She got up in a mink coat and all. She said to him, this is so disgusting. If you have anything to do with this piece of crap, I want a divorce.
Wow.
She said it really loud.
That's a great scene.
And so there went my studio career. But Sam Markoff just, he took it immediately. So it worked out great, and it made money.
Just curious, did you know Larry Cohen from New York?
I know him now. I did not know him. No.
Yeah.
Just mostly just because of you're the only two filmmakers that I always see that there is always like a political undertone or some sort of satire on both your films.
They would compare, and they would also back then. Blue Sunshine was constantly. I was being compared to Cronenberg at that time, and he had a film. at the same same time. You know, they would go to the circuit. They go to the London Film Festival, Edinburgh, and
was it Shivers back then?
Probably Shivers. What did he do after that?
Rabid.
Yeah.
And then Brood.
It feels like Shivers is the one that to me would be closest in the way it feels to Blue Sunshine.
Yeah.
But I mean, Blue Sunshine, it's funny. Blue Sunshine was my first, as a kid, my first image that I became obsessed with, where I still didn't see the film for years, but I was looking at the poster and always wondering what it was and when I would see it, and had no idea what it was about. And I'm sure when I saw it at like 12, I didn't get it. It wasn't until I was a lot older, there's so much else going on. But it's interesting just how an image or a poster, the power of that. I mean, that's, I don't know where the idea, because it almost feels like it could have been the label for the LSD or something, you know?
Yeah,
it felt like the packaging of the actual thing. I don't know.
I wrote an article for Fangoria a couple of years ago about Blue Sunshine, where I talked about how my parents owned it. Like, we had it on like Betamax or VHS or whatever. And the box cover scared me so bad. And for some reason in my brain, I remembered the girl's eyes bulging out of her skull. Like, that's how bad she was screaming, because she's bald and everything, and she's, you know, screaming. But I remembered her eyes actually protruding. And then when I saw it again, I was like, oh, they're not. But for some reason, it had stuck in my brain as being far worse than it actually was. So
the power of
I think of that.
Yeah. You did a disco scene. You covered it. You got your bases covered.
What about picking or having Zalman King as a lead in that? Because I just want to talk about that in context, because when I think of him, obviously I know him as a producer, doing things like the Red Shoe Diaries and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't realize that he had this long acting career before that.
Not that long, but he had an acting career. And I don't want to speak about the dead. You know, Zalman died 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a shame. I actually talked to him. I hadn't seen him for years, and I talked to him. He didn't tell me he was sick. Great guy. I mean, very interesting, intense guy. But he was not my first choice. He wasn't my second choice. It was one of those things. He was on The Lawyers, kind of, you know, a lawyer in a suit, and a guy that's on the run in his right age. He had the look, you know. And then, I don't know, I said I don't want to say the same shit I say 8 times, but in case there's somebody out there hasn't heard my crap, I'm the world's worst casting person. I mean, like genius at it. If you come up to read for a role, if I'm making a movie and you don't get the role, you're going to be huge. I mean,
who are some of your close missed?
Well, on Squirm, I had Martin Sheen, I had Kim Basinger, and I had Stallone.
That would be a decent cast.
I know.
And for the same, I could have had them for the same exact money as the movie was made.
But you could never have had Stallone in that film and been in Georgia. That guy just looks like he's never stepped foot in Georgia.
That's the reason why I wouldn't see him. The other two, I mean...
Marty Sheen would have been great.
Marty was cast.
Yeah, he'd be great.
And I uncast him. And Kim came in, and, I mean, she was probably the most beautiful... She was 21 years old. I was 25. And I had never seen anybody as beautiful. I mean, she was a Ford model, I think. And she was from Georgia.
Oh,
and
wow,
she says... I said, you know, there's nudity, and she says, well, I have no problem with my body. And I'm like, and
done.
How did
she not get it? What happened?
Because Schmucko, me, they said, what do you think? And my producers were theater, Edgar Lansbury and Joe Brew. They're theater people. They respect the author, you know, and all of that. Too much. Instead of saying, schmuck, who's going to see this movie? Adolescent boys, like, don't they want to see her in the shower? Shut up. We're paying for it. Cast it. That's what they should have said. And I go, okay. But I said, being the auteur and so artistic, I said, who's going to believe that she lives next door to a worm farm? You know? It's like little Abner, you know? That's funny. I talked my way out of it. It's like, because realistically, I was right, but we're making a movie here.
Yeah.
I bet she lived next to a worm farm in real life. I bet that's where she grew up.
I still wouldn't have cast.
Yeah, right.
Said, yeah, but that's not a movie.
Right.
Is anybody putting out Blue Sunshine as a Blu-ray anytime soon?
Actually, the big news on that movie is for all these years, the negative was lost.
Oh.
And now it's found.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where was that found?
It was at Something Weird.
Oh, yeah. Mike Franey's
But Mike
huge
had
amounts
it, but for whatever reason, all these years, I certainly made it clear. Anybody, SOS all over the world, this negative. So I just figured it was destroyed at the lab. It's been sitting in its mint condition. I'm getting shipped,
that's amazing.
like now, to New York. And I'm partnering up with somebody. We're going to make a
great
a Blu-ray, and we're going to do a, what do you call it, TCP file.
Nice.
And so that's going to be incredible because that film looks so much better than the DVD. So much better. The DVD kind of makes it look like a TV movie, but the negative, especially with tweaking the color corrections, it's going to be good.
Yeah. No, I'm excited about that one.
Wow.
And I read about, normally I get bummed when I hear about any quote unquote remake happening of an older movie, but Blue Sunshine is being remade and you're involved.
Well, it's in the early stages, but I had a meeting yesterday. That's one of the reasons I'm out here with a guy named Vincent Newman, who did We Are the Millers, which I thought was funny as hell. And he's now doing a movie called, Vincent, I'm giving you a plug. He's doing a movie called Patient Zero in England. And so we were talking about, writers and stuff. So we're in that stage. But it would be modernized.
Yeah, how do you, because LSD is such a big part of it, I guess without giving it away.
Well, the obvious thing is designer drugs. That's what they used to call,
right.
The party drugs at the clubs. So if anything, if you want to go by realism, it's more likely they were literally concoctions of drugs. This is the party drugs. So you really didn't know what you can give a name. You say this is ecstasy, this is that. But basically, that's, people in labs making up drugs to get high. So you can easily have a delayed reaction.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to do with the hippie movement? Because I feel like that movie seems like the concept almost seems angry about some of because of predicting where the hippie movement was going to go. Did you have anything to do with that in New York at that time, or was that already passed?
Oh, I was in the middle of. It's a weird thing that I was, because of when I was born and where I was born, and then also who I am, every famous thing I was at. Like everything you hear. I was there when the Beatles got off the plane, cut school. Beatles came off the plane at Kennedy Airport for the first time.
Really?
And it was the first time I saw, and the common denominator, all you young people out there that see about the hippies and the March on Washington, I can tell you this with a lot of authority, that every guy you see at every one of these protests, they were there to get laid.
So nothing's changed in the whole universe of time.
Oh, Occupy Wall Street. Oh, This chick's coming from Ohio. They got no place to sleep.
Yeah.
That's a thing. It's we have a great country, but that's what's great about it. And you can look like you care, and you can look like, but guys don't change.
Yeah.
Come on. And if you go to Washington, like Martin Luther King thing, so first of all, you got everything. You're a girl. Okay.
I am.
Okay, so
I don't know if you guys noticed that. It's true.
We don't, but
just the fact we have something in common. We didn't even say Happy New Year, and that is the cause. We're here, right? You came from wherever I came, so we have this bond already.
Yeah.
Now, where are you staying?
Yeah.
Well, there's a room on the bottom of the church, and they let it really. And all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, you're in a sleeping bag with somebody from Ohio. Think about it. That was the draw. But I was at, Woodstock. I was at the first Be-In in Central Park. I was at the Stones' first concert in New York at the New York Academy of Music.
Wow.
Which is only 400 people showed up, and I was one of them.
You're like Zelig.
Yeah. People have said
You're basically
that.
Zelig.
Yeah. It's just, I had a sense of where what's really happening, and how to be there. That's all. It's
interesting.
Yeah.
So you were speaking a lot from personal experience with that, the Blue Sunshine, and how the hippie movement is
Yeah, and I saw the
15 years later.
hypocrisy and I saw the bullshit, and it's always more fun to satirize your own generation than somebody else's generation. So it kind of came naturally, but I'm still like that. I mean, I drive my friends crazy with like calling they say, you're always calling us on their shit. And I said, yeah. I try to, I'm full of shit too, but at least I know it. You know, like I outwardly say so when I'm totally being hypocritical. They don't. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, and just before Dawn, we were talking about before when she puts her fist down, but she's like really feels like one of the first fighting final girls, because most of them I remember I read something with Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you hadn't seen it, but the thing is, they're not at all alike, because she's still just a survivor. She's not really being proactive. She's just running.
No, and
she does a good job of running away from the people, but she's not actually actively taking up the fight to beat the thing that's going to kill her.
Oh, by the way, just on this topic, before you say that, guess where else I was first? The first Women's Lib March.
Wow.
On Fifth Avenue. Okay? That's the word. Women's Lib was the new thing, and they had a march down Fifth Avenue. And me and this guy, Michael Johnson, we're going to get so laid. we're so...
I love the theme of this.
We're so, like, down with women, you know, with feminism and all that. We get there. They all look like truck drivers. Every one of them. What a misfire. And we're marching with it. It was like, guy looks like woman's like Lou Costello I'm marching with. Anyway. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that was one of the things that always drove me crazy about the final girl theory is that for the majority of the final girls, it's just them going through consequences. It's them being there with things happening around them, but rarely are they causing things to change.
Yeah, you can almost call it warrior girl or something. Like it's a different thing. It's somebody who's going to take up the fight. It's like, I'm going to die or I'm going to fight this thing off and kill it myself. And I think it seems to be like that seemed to be a very purposeful role. And I don't know if that was part of your Women's Lib March.
Don't forget. I never got laid with Debbie Benson. I'm thinking, I was almost going to say something else, and I didn't.
That would have to get edited out. I could tell that was going to get. It doesn't matter. It would have been edited
out. So 79, I shot the movie in 79, and it was 1980. Film 1980. Right. The term didn't exist. The term slasher didn't exist, and the term final girl didn't exist. So I wasn't thinking of a thing that didn't exist. It's like, that's a retrospective term. It's like heavy metal. If you got enough Led Zeppelin lookalikes, you could give it a name. But when Led Zeppelin's doing it, then they go, hey, let's put together a heavy metal band. There's no such thing. And so, and I didn't say, I'm going to make a slasher. The reason that she was that character is because I tried to make her the John Voight character in Deliverance. It was very, that's what my goal was. That, okay, the John Voight thing was interesting because the guy is this milquetoast, and I want to say that anybody, a librarian, whenever has a primal self, that the biggest, strongest guy couldn't deal with somebody who taps into that their animal.
Connects to it,
it's like, try to fight with a chimpanzee. Mm-hmm. You're going to lose, So I said, it'd be interesting to do the same character arc as he had, only with a woman. And it's basically the same thing. Mm. And then she gets to her primal self at the end, and that's what it was. It wasn't about being the final person. I never thought of it that way.
Mm.
She kills the fuck out of that dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same's opposite true, right? With Burt Reynolds, he is the primal character, and yet he gets hurt,
he's Greg
Henry. Yeah, he becomes the withering.
Oh no, I did.
Coward.
That was all.
That's a great movie too, Deliverance. Deliverance is one of my favorite American movies.
Yeah, well, that was. Yeah. I read the book. I saw the movie I loved that. At the time, it was a perfect movie. It still is, but it was just. Really, to do something that's that artistic and captured the poetry of the book and everything, and still delivered, and had a little Lord of the Flies element to it. So that's what I was doing.
Yeah, and I guess that survival is missing. Friday 13th are a lot more stock. I mean, the first one's a different kind of story. After that, it is just how do you kill the characters?
Yeah, and then I hear the dumb horror fans, the smart ones, and the dumb ones always say, this had great kills. It's like, what the fuck is that? So in other words, if somebody could figure out a way to slice somebody in half, that's cool. There's special effects are ways to kill people. That's not filmmaking. I mean, anybody could do that. But, so they'll say my films that didn't have really good kills or had one good kill. It's like, do something else. Like, watch a Humphrey Bogart movie.
Expand your
Great
horizons.
kills.
Yeah. And also, how do you choose? Because we've talked about regional horror a lot, and people really nail the location shooting. And I think that one's Oregon, right? Just how did you choose to shoot in Oregon or in Georgia? I mean, being from New York, it's interesting to choose these very different places to film.
The Squirm was supposed to be. I wrote it for New England. And I wanted to be like Shadow over Innsmouth, that Lovecraft feel and have weird people and all that.
Oh, that would totally work with the worms.
Yeah, and worms. I mean, it was, you could smell the place like seaweed, And by the time I wrote it and then it got financed, it would be too cold to shoot it there. And, in November up there, it'd be freezing. And also I wanted it to be claustrophobic. I wanted the trees and everything because, like when Hitchcock did The Birds, there's a reason why they're on an island. So you can't, even if you're not broadcasting, there's no way out of here, so the birds are going to kill you. You have to know that without saying it. You have to feel enclosed and isolated. So you can't just split.
And you don't know what's happening in San Francisco because you're there.
Yeah.
And it's a bit mysterious.
Right.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, we said we just can't. We either wait another year or wait for the season. We were going into fall and then winter and then late spring, and then you miss the Cannes Film Fest. Everything was done in a cycle then, or we shoot it in the South. So I said, well, I don't want palm trees. So where could we go that in November I'll have trees? And there was this guy told me this live oaks. I never heard that term. That's the common tree in Georgia. Live oaks, and the moss comes down.
Spanish moss, yeah.
And then if you go down there in November, it's going to look the same as the summer. I said, boom, that's where we're going. So I said, there's only one problem. I wrote the script for New England. I've never been to Georgia. We got to southernize this whole thing. And immediately, like in a couple of weeks, that is a problem.
Did you go down there to kind of explore it?
I scouted it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I scouted it, but I'm not a Southerner. And, of course, it was so easy for me to write Don Scardino's character because, like, an alter ego. It's like he's a New Yorker, I am, and Ed Crane. It was all shtick. But the other characters, Pat Piercy was from Texas, so she had a natural drawl. And the sheriff was making it up, and all the locals were spot on, of course.
Yeah, you feel it. No, I like Deliverance. I think it's very similar in terms of the feel of the local people. Yeah. Remember the Driver Brothers? You got to get the Driver Brothers.
I love the chubby guy, the old guy in Squirm in the luncheonette, talking about the old turkey gobbler. The storm of. Because I said to him, they're not actors. You can't give them a script or tell them. But I said, did you ever have any giant storms that you can remember in your childhood? And he's thinking, and I go, you can't say, hold that thought, and, then he's going to choke up. And I just went like this. I'm twirling my finger for the radio audience. And to roll and talk. And I said, well, what happened? He goes, well, I remember one storm. And what he says in the movie was one take. That's what he said.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Wow.
And he says, and I was knee-high to a duck. Jeff Lieberman would never write that line.
Yeah. But now it looks like you did.
But guess what? It says written by me. I mean, when you do that, it makes you look like a genius.
Yeah.
When the guy, Willie Grimes, he was a local. The guy that played Carl Dagenhart or something. And he says, you're going to be digging deep, sonny boy, right down to your toenails. It's genius. Think about, in reality, that's not digging at all. Your toenails are above the ground. But it sounds like you're going to be digging forever to China, you know? It's genius. But all right, my genius is knowing that it's genius and to not cut it out. But that's I would never think of writing that.
That's funny. What about Oregon? How'd you end up choosing Oregon?
That was supposed to be in the Smoky Mountains, and I think it was just logistics. we cast the whole movie and did all the pre-production in Los Angeles. So it was easier to scout, go north we were going to do it in Northern California. And then I didn't like what I saw up there, the Redwood area. And then we make plane reservations. We're going to fly up to Salem. We get to the airport at LAX. Here's a story I probably never told. We get there, and it says, canceled, volcano.
In Salem?
Yeah. It says, canceled, volcano. I go, this got to be an April Fool. Well, it's not April. Like, volcano? Usually they say storm or weather or bad equipment or just canceled. But volcano. That was Mount St. Helens.
Huh.
And the ash spread from Mount St. Helens, because this was really close to Mount St. Helens. A couple of days later, they let us fly up there. It was about 3 inches deep. It looked like snow because my DP was taking samples. He said, this is going to be worth a lot of money someday. He's filling up these jars. He says, it's like the shake, when you're buying Coke, it's like, it's really fine. And, and he's got, to this day, he's probably got these things on his bookshelf. But I said, Joel, look around you. There's about 35 tons of this stuff. And you're putting in these little, but they're going to clean it up and nobody's going to think of saving it,
That's funny.
Wow. And so you had to location scout to shoot in all of that?
No. By the time we shot, it was all gone. And then we shot actually about an hour into that national forest from Salem. So we had to go there every day, which is gorgeous. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful place.
Yeah, I'm surprised more things aren't shot in Oregon as a state. I don't know if they don't have good tax incentives compared to Georgia and whatnot and Louisiana, but I think Oregon's one of the best looking states I've been to.
Well, there's a show called Portlandia.
It's probably shot in LA backlot. That's part of the joke.
Yeah. Probably. Can you talk a little bit about what, because you were living out here again for the 90s and working quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because your IMDb makes it seem like you're kind of hiding until... Dead. Okay. But you weren't. You were actually doing a lot of work in that period.
I did a lot more work from 89 to 2000. That was the bulk of my career as far as output. But if it's not in the horror genre, I might as well be dead. I don't exist. And people actually, when I did Satan's Little Helper in 2004, and I was in Brussels, 900 people, and I said that I told them with a straight face, I said, a lot of people ask the question why they haven't seen me, and a lot of people thought I was dead. I was not dead. I was in a coma.
That's awesome.
That's like a soap opera
and
answer.
All staring at me, and I said, and while I was in the coma, I was like, I was having these dreams about these things that you could put a whole movie on a little record thing, and you put it in. It's like, and I was mentioned, and then they finally figured out this guy's full of shit. He's not.
Your dead zone moment.
But they, if John Carpenter did a documentary on Sonny Liston on HBO, which I did, but say he did, would you watch the thing and go, oh, John Carpenter directed it? You don't watch. Yeah. You're just like, oh, that was good or bad, but you don't look at
the
who
names,
did it. It doesn't say Jeff Lieberman's, Sonny Liston's thing, you know. So all the things that I was doing, just like, it was great for me, but it wasn't. As far as the horror fans, it's like, well, he's had it. He did these things back then. Where the fact of the matter is, when I came out to L.A. at that time, I had already written a script for Dustin Hoffman. And Murray Shiskel, who was the guy who wrote Tootsie, was the head of production. And he said, shouldn't Dusty see your film, Squirm and Blue Sun? And because he was saying maybe he'd want you to direct this thing. It's going to be a big studio movie. And I said, no, because it's going to cloud the waters. Like, this has nothing. It was like a romantic, it had nothing to do with any work that I did like in the horror genre. So when I came out to LA and the power of that script that I wrote for him, it didn't get made, but it got me 24/7 work for 10 years, studios, And plus, I did a huge feature documentary called "But Seriously," which I really think you should all watch.
What's that? What's it about?
It's actually somebody uploaded on YouTube, and it's like hundreds of thousands of people already. I didn't do it. I did the thing. Rob Reiner is executive producer. It's Castle Rock. It's on Showtime.
Oh, cool.
In '93, and then I did a follow-up one in '94. And again, it says produced and directed by Jeff Lieberman. Who the hell? Who cares? You know, I mean, and certainly a Squirm fan is not going to. Hey, that's the guy that did Squirm.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't. It doesn't.
We're the type of fans that would catch that on Showtime and be like, "Oh my God, is that the same guy?"
Yeah,
yeah. And also, it's a common name. It's not Smith, but it is, I'm not the only Lieberman. You know, so there's other. And then there's Never Ending Story 3, which was a silly assignment, but it was huge as far as a paycheck and you know, big. It was a big movie. It was $35 million at that time.
I'm looking at it now on IMDb. Is But Seriously about comedians?
It's not about comedians.
What's the? Because there's not a plot right up here. What's the topic?
Okay, it's 30 years of. Is it 30 years? Something like that. Of 33 years of American history from the point of view of the socially and politically oriented stand-ups.
That's awesome.
Because the idea was that I said, you know, once I came of age, like in my teens, I watched the news. I say, bullshit, Vietnam War. Everything they were saying was crap. And when I would see like Lenny Bruce or Mort Saul or Richard Pryor, I'd go right on. Like they think this is the truth to me. Now, say, yeah, that's because you're young or whatever. Well, my premise was now here we are in 1993, and the truth that I thought was true is the truth that everybody accepts as being true. They don't accept what the news told us at that time. They accept what Lenny and Carlin and all was saying back then. So in 2020 hindsight is the only way you could prove it, right? Is to show, here's what the news said, here's what this guy said. Here's what the news said. Here's what Lily Tomlin said. Whoopi Goldberg, you know, and just go on. And that was my pitch to Rob Reiner. And his answer was, how much you need?
Your cast in this is amazing. Robin Williams,
Everybody.
Eddie Murphy, Jackie Mason.
Everybody.
It's amazing.
Well, and then ironically, after last night, now it's the comics who are being killed. You know, in France, it was actually cartoonists and comics and satirists, which is hard to believe, but you know, sign of the times.
It's and you know, I could imagine what those guys, you know, what Richie Pryor would say. I don't think there's. Well, this is another subject, but you know, I was really steeped in two things. Not film, but stand-up comedy and boxing. Those are the two things. So I got it out of my system. I did But Seriously, and I did the Sonny Liston HBO documentary. And to this day, But Seriously is by far I'm the most proud of anything that I've done.
What's that big boxing? Was it When We Were Kings? There was a big boxing. It turned out that when I lived in Woodstock, I lived in the house of that director, and when
Leon, he's a
well after that, and we found all these boxes. My mom found all these boxes in the attic of stuff of his and photos, and she told me about it just years.
Wait, years ago. Hold it. Leon still lives in Woodstock.
Yeah, well, he must have lived in a different house. Yeah, in Woodstock, because I lived in Woodstock for like 3 years or something when I was a little, like 3 years old. And Mom, and she just told me she has no interest in film, but she was like, "Oh yeah, some director lived there. He made a documentary once, and I found all these archival prints." So I'm like, "Oh," and then years later, I was like, "Oh, it must have been When We Were Kings." I assumed that's the one, but
I don't think it was because he had that house when he did one.
Maybe it's another.
Because I'm pretty good friends with him. In fact, he won the way I met him is he won an Oscar for that the same year I won an Emmy for Sonny Liston. So somebody from the LA Weekly interviewed both of us the same day and said, "You guys should, you're New Yorkers, you should," and he just put us together. And we've been friends.
Maybe ask him if he ever rented his house.
Yeah.
Could have been. We might have lived there. We might have. I don't know. I have memories of living there, but I think it was near a graveyard from memory. That's fitting.
So did you feel that maybe some of your feature films, like they tend to all be within the genre, but you know, when you were going into doing documentaries and stuff like this, you kind of tried to, I guess, not ignore it, but not let people know that about that side of you. Did you feel like you were typecast in those types of films? Or was it difficult to do things outside?
I didn't want to be typecast. You know, people would say to me, just keep doing them, and one of them will be a big hit. Doesn't mean it's really good, because I don't think Friday the 13th, I mean, you know, I'd see Halloween is genius, but Friday the 13th, I think is stupid. I mean, I thought it then, I still, you know, it's like, oh, don't go and get the cat, you know, don't, she gets a, you know, pitchfork in the head. I mean, what is that? You know, it's like the next person, I'll go outside and find out what that noise is. That's a movie, you know? but it makes
it's a 13 film series.
Exactly.
Get another remake.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not knocking commercial. You know, I'd love to do a movie and make $100 million. Don't get me wrong. I'll settle for $50 million. But you can't. I don't think you can do that on purpose. I don't think that Sean Cunningham was thinking, oh, this, you know, it's after the fact. And you see whatever.
He definitely wasn't planning on that one.
Yeah,
what it was. Where are you at now in terms of like where are your interests in? I mean, what kind of work and stuff do you want? Do you still focus on writing? Do you want to do more documentaries?
I always like, I love to do a documentary. It's not so much in the skill. It's the most common. If you're a decent filmmaker, you could make a decent documentary. The subject is everything. And I have to have a subject that really makes it a labor of love. Something. And there is one that I really want to do. I just don't know. Anybody out there know Arnold Schwarzenegger? It's not about him, but he could make it. He's probably, if you're listening, does Arnold listen to you?
He doesn't,
Probably,
but
yeah, he
Van Damme's a listener, and he might know.
Really,
So Jean-Claude, if you're listening and you know Artie still.
Go talk to Arnold, please. There's a guy named Joe Weider that people are not aware of the name. You don't, anybody here know Joe Weider? Okay, no. You know all the gyms everywhere in the world and all the idea of your diet and junk food and everything that you know about health in today's world comes from one man named Joe Weider. Isn't that amazing? Huh. That the entire, when I go to a gym and I listen to these trainers, they don't know. These guys, you know, they get the girls, you know, they don't know that's called, what they're doing, because Joe Weider started the training things. He brought Arnold to the United States. He set him up in Santa Monica. Arnold said, my whole life I owe it to one man, Joe Weider, at his funeral, because he died recently. But
is he in Pumping Iron? The documentary?
I was going to say
Joe.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
He wouldn't be. He died. He was a billionaire because he had the magazines, the muscle magazines, right? So he had the Mr. America, Mr. World, all that stuff. So the trade-off was that Arnold would be in the magazines, and then he would support Arnold. That was the trade. And it worked out great. But he made $1 zillion on food supplements. When you go to what is that?
GNC or whatever?
It's all garbage. But, you know, but you'll see Joe Weider's brand, but you'll see 6 other brands. They're Joe Weider. It's just different names. It's like a monopoly. He was called up for that. So, but everything, because I got into, I can show you a picture if this was visual of me at 19 years old. Or you can go on my Facebook thing. It's the only evidence yet. But when I was 19, I was so into that, like a religion. And you're talking about 60, you know, it's like unheard of. You're a freak, you're gay, you know, it's like to look like that at that time. And I'd say to my mother, don't eat that, it's junk food. And I was eating yogurt, which you couldn't get. Now in the stores, they get all the flavor.
That's an aisle now, the yogurt aisle.
Yeah.
Yogurt, there was just plain yogurt. And then we would put Kretschmeyer's wheat germ in it. This sounds normal to you now. This all comes from Joe Weider. Yeah, but nobody knew what wheat germ was, or kelp, or any of this stuff. And the idea that French fries, junk food, that Joe called it, and the reason why it was called junk food. Guys like Stallone know about weed. There are a lot. It's not like nobody knows, but the world doesn't know.
Right.
You know, and the guy had such an enormous impact. It's wild. And his family was Holocaust survivors. They went to Canada, and he and his brother started this magazine on the kitchen table, and it's a great story. So that's.
Is that hard when you did 15 years or so of documentaries? How hard is it then to get something like Satan's Little Helper out?
No, I didn't do 15 years of documentaries.
Or just films and TV and other stuff?
No, because when I was doing the documentaries, the big thing that I was doing money-wise is writing. People that write scripts for studios, like 9 out of 10 don't get made, but you get paid. Mm-hmm. And I was living in Beverly Hills and doing, studio after studio. They're only studio scripts. I rewrote one for Disney. I wrote one for Fox with Bob Chardoff, and just they don't get made for various reasons. But you're making on some of them. I made more money than Squirm cost to make. I mean, it sounds crazy, right? So, but if you go on IMDb, I mean, you have to be a schmuck. There are schmucks that put credits of they wrote something that didn't get made. It's like, who cares? Is the answer, right? Yeah. But I have so many of them over that period of time. So I was working all the time. It's just.
But when you said you wanted to get back into directing a horror film, was that a difficult thing to sell at that point, or did you go independently to make Satan's Little Helper?
No, it was independent, but I didn't say that. It was a fellow Carl Testevan. I was up at the a film festival, Cinemorte in Vancouver, and showing, Just Before Dawn and Squirm or whatever, and he financed it. Guy I met at the festival.
Because that's one of the only movies, and you tell me if this is true to you, I've never met someone who didn't like that movie. Mm-hmm. I'll have someone go, I put it on, looked at the cover, didn't think it looked like anything special. I watch it. It's a really good little movie. Yeah. I've heard that literally 1,000 times about that film. And I had that same experience. A friend of mine was watching it in New Zealand. I sat on his couch. It just started. I said, what is this? And I saw like maybe The Mask or something. I was like, it looks all right. Sat there, didn't know who made it. And by the end of the movie, I was like, this is a really charming movie. It's funny. It's like, it seems to be your most overtly kind of comic film too, which is great.
When I made that movie, because I at a point in my life when you don't need the money and you don't give. I mean, I used to have the attitude that I didn't give a shit, but now I really didn't give a shit in real life. I really didn't. Now I really, really, really don't give a shit. So when you get to 3 reelies, if you live long enough for 3 reelies. You just, you don't like it? Fuck you. I don't care. Yeah. I don't care. I'm doing this for me. And if I think something is weird or funny, if I respond to it, then I have to figure, at this point, if I was like totally insane, like what do you call it? When they strap you in, straitjacket, insane, I would have known that a long time ago. Yeah. Okay, so that didn't happen. So I'm like a functioning person.
Mad person.
Crazy. So there's got to be other people. Like I always say to people when I get this all the time, it's like, oh, you had such an impact on my life, and I say, so you're basically telling me you're crazy. You're not a usual. But Satan's Little Helper, I had so much fun with it because it's like total, just try to offend everybody for the reasons that are just stupid that they get offended, like religion and all that. I just said, there's a lot of places that they couldn't sell it. Like it was a real problem. Like in the Spain, it took a long time because of the Jesus stuff.
It felt like a film. I remember when I was thinking, it felt like something Todd Haynes, like a young person's first film. It felt like, Todd Haynes is going to make a horror film, or not Todd. It's like Todd Solondz. It felt like if Todd Solondz had made his first film as Happy, what's the one in high school, Welcome to the Dollhouse. If he had made that as a straight horror film, it would have been that film. And I remember thinking that it must have been some 26-year-old's first film. So it's always really cool.
Well, that's right. You know who said isn't. Mike Gingold? That was in his review.
That it looked.
He gave it the high, however many stars. But he said that if he didn't know it was me, it looked like a much younger person made it. And to me, that's the ultimate compliment. Yeah. Only because I'm current. It's like saying you're still current.
Oh yeah! Did you ever see Sidney Lumet's film Before the Devil? Before the Devil Knows You're Dead.
It, no.
Felt like I thought a 26-year-old made. I remember sitting down watching it. It was so youthful, and he was 80.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like if you try to make a movie, because I was so afraid all this time. If I go back And if I make a movie and try to go back and pick up where I left off, it's going to suck so bad because it's so much, it's now. It was 2004. So I said, I got to tap into the me, not the 25. I was 25 when I made Squirm. But the headset, the way I used to think, just do that again. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It really doesn't. I mean, I pitch ideas to people and they buy them today, and I'm competing against 20-somethings all the time. And it's like, your age is not on the... I was always thinking I'll get a young person to go in and say they're me, and I could and they have a secret headphone, like a little ear.
That's
thing,
a good reality series.
I could tell them. Okay, here's what you say.
It played at the New York City Horror Film Festival, right?
Yeah, but it played at Tribeca.
That was the first year I was working for the New York City Horror Film Festival.
But I did it because Mike Hine.
Mike Hine, and I remember John Carl came out. I'm sure I met you there. And but that was I remember that night because that was the first night I started working for the New York City Horror Film Festival, and I was the celebrity liaison was the title they gave me. So I was just taking drinks and cigarettes to the guys.
It wasn't his first festival.
No, it'd been going 1 year prior to that. Yeah, so, right. But I remember seeing it there, and the audience was howling.
Yeah, it's a great audience movie. If you see that with a big audience, and they do it at Halloween, it was at the Music Box Theater. They invited in Chicago, and that's huge.
Yeah,
that's like 1,000. And I wanted to go there because it's still got the organ pit. It's like vintage place. It's just great. And they had me and Sybil Danning.
Oh, yeah.
And it said on the marquee, it said Jeff Lieberman and Sybil Danning. And I don't know, should I say this? You might want to edit this out, but it's not so terrible. But I ran in, I said, Sybil, because I knew her from one of these conventions. I said, you got to see, our names are on the marquee, and it's got the bulbs, like the old movie theaters. That's so cool. I got pictures of it. She says, come on out. She comes out, and her face drops. I said, what's the matter? She goes, you get top billing. What? I said, what are you talking? It's like, I would never, if it said Sybil Danning and Jeff Lieberman, I wouldn't go, gee, how come? But she said, well, you don't understand, I'm an actress. And no, this doesn't mean anything. But it was a great experience to see that many people. They're with it all the time. It's like as soon as, when I saw it at Tribeca, I was really nervous. It was the first audience that ever saw it. And that's not a horror audience. That's a white wine and black clothing audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I sat next to Mick Garris at that show. I remember that because I had just gotten, because I was celebrity liaison, I had just gotten his wife pizza because she wanted pizza. And then I sat down and he was like, sit over here. And that was the first night I met Mick as well. So,
yeah, well.
It was a good crowd.
But not at Tribeca.
No, this was, the New York City Horror Film Festival was at Tribeca that same year, too.
No,
this is the Tribeca Film Festival,
that's just the Tribeca that we use in the theater down there. I'm saying that it played the Tribeca Film Festival.
Were you guys in the midnight slots, or did it play?
Very cool. And it was a big deal at that time to even have that kind of film in Robert De Niro and all this. And they said we got to have. It actually came in after they stopped looking at films. It was closed off, but when they saw the film, they said we got to have this. So I thought, this is a way to kill the movie before. I didn't want to do it because it's a major enough film festival that's going to get reviewed. And this is the kind of movie that critics love to beat up because there's no names, Amanda Plummer, but basically low budget thing. They could destroy it and show how smart they are. You know what I'm saying? I know how they, so I said, why are we doing this? And it's my paranoia, so we show the movie, and as soon as I was thinking, okay, this guy, here it comes, he's going to take this cat, he's going to write boo with the cat. This is sink or swim time. Like, this audience could clear out. And they went, all of them, right? And then somebody laughs and gave them permission to laugh because it is funny.
Yeah.
And then I go, okay, done. I got them. And then from there on, they're loving the movie and Variety and First, a Hollywood Reporter reviewed it while the festival was still on and gave it the best review I ever got on anything I ever did.
Wow.
So this is the way my brain, here's your brain on drugs. Instead of getting excited, what do? I call the publicist and I say, could you get the screener back from the Variety guy before he looks at it? Because why would I do that? Because if he gives it a shitty review, it's going to negate the Hollywood Reporter.
Yeah.
And he says, Lieberman, you're out of your mind. Like, this is your, like, I said, yeah, but you know, these guys, that's what they do. It's like, and then Variety gave it a fantastic review. Yeah. So I figured that, you know, it's seasonal and every Halloween, it just, I got a call. My friend is Dylan's manager. So he calls me and he says, Lebo, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He says, you know, because I have that Man of Peace, the Dylan song in it. That's how I got it. And that's how I got it. So he says, I just got a call from Bob. And I'm thinking, Bob, uh-oh. And he says, he saw that he was on the road and he saw it. It was around Halloween time. It's like 2 years ago. And he saw it on TV. And the first thing I was thinking of is he's going to get in trouble because Bob said, "Would you sold this piece of shit like this?" And he goes, "Bob loved the movie. He thought it was fantastic. He's got to have a DVD."
That's awesome.
So I said, "Does he want me to sign it? You know, if he signs one of his records, you know, who knows?" But yeah, so Bob Dylan loves it, and to me that means a lot more than Variety and Hollywood Reporter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good endorsement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great film.
Before we wrap up here, I don't know why I sometimes I moderate panels at some of these horror conventions and stuff. And recently I got it in my head that my dream panel would be to have you, Jeff Lieberman, Bill Lustig, Larry Fessenden, and Frank Henenlotter together. And I don't know why. I think it's because you all have this New York sensibility and all tell the best stories.
You have to add Larry Cohen to that too.
And Larry, that's Larry Cohen to that too.
But you could call it the ARP convention. You know, it's like we're all old.
Yeah.
No, but I mean,
the older you get, the more stories you have.
Yeah, but I mean, you've crossed paths with a lot of those guys.
I don't know Larry.
President.
Don't know him.
That's the strange thing I have to say about the New York horror community is that it's not
there is no community.
A community like it is here in LA, where like in LA, you know everyone who's making horror films and everyone
pretty
works with everyone else.
Paths,
it's very much like, I don't want to call it incestuous, but in a way it is, where it's all based off recommendations and who you've worked with in the past and things like that. But in New York, that really doesn't exist. Like there were people, like I would find out that horror films were coming out of like, you know, yes, this guy from the Upper East Side made this a couple of years ago.
No one knows him.
No one knows him. No one. And you never will. You'll never see him again.
No, even when back in the so-called golden age of, you know, in the 70s, it wasn't like that. It was like you're trying to make a movie, so you're gonna cross paths because you're working at the same lab, or you're working at, there was a place called Magno Sound, so everybody used. There was 2 places you can mix your movies. There was a certain amount of necessity to know people just out of, like Jack Shoulder. The way I met Jack, he was like, what was The Burning? He was editing The Burning, and I was doing Just Before Dawn. So how could you not wander into each?
It's
you know,
interesting.
that was the scene where Brian De Palma, he used Danny Sable, who was a sound guy. As a matter of fact, he did Blowout based on Travolta plays Danny Sable's character, the guy that does sound for horror movies. And if you watch Blowout, you'll see a poster of Squirm behind
I did see that. I watched it just about a week ago, and I noticed that.
So the only time I met Brian, he was with John Travolta. They were at like Century City Mall or something. And I said, "Hey, Brian, it's Jeff Lieberman." He said, "Oh, yeah, Squirm." And I said, "Let me ask you a question. That's Danny, right?" He says, "Of course." I said, "So that Squirm thing," like, he says, "I put it there." Like he
That's awesome.
Put it there.
Wow.
It's like,
Great.
so you would say, you know, it's like a special placement to put Squirm in the movie.
Oh,
and
that's
behind
cool.
it. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
And you both had Greg Henry in key movies. Just Before Dawn, and he used him as the Killer Indian and
it was like
Melanie
Rear
Griffiths.
Window.
The Rear Window ripoff. How do we not Dress to Kill? Oh, the one all shot in L.A. and the guy
Body
looks like
double.
body double, and the guy looks like Bill Maher.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
It's a little off topic, but not too far. But you know what weird connection I discovered in one of your films? So I was researching Sandy King Carpenter because we were getting ready to do the Carpenter
amazing?
issue coming up.
Yeah.
She was your script supervisor,
Exactly.
and I had no idea.
Oh, that's cool.
And I didn't know that she married John.
Yeah.
And she went on Facebook. I said, "Hey, Sandy, yo, what's up?" And she says, "John says hello. You know, he's in the background because now I know they're married." And she has the kind of, I'm sure that it's not just Blue Sunshine. She remembers minutia. You want to know trivia of Blue Sunshine? She knows stuff I would never. You'd have to do a brain tap or something. I don't remember. And she, to this day, remembers little things about that movie. So
Well,
I
it was
would
her
im-
job on set to
Exactly.
remember the minutiae.
That's her, but I'm sure that all the other movies that she did, she remembers also. But we're talking, so that would be a cool. She should do a commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I, that's an idea. That if because I got the negative now, get her to do a commentary and say, notice the way the pencil is in his ear and then it doesn't match. She could.
This was the fourth take he used on the third.
Like when you watch Squirm, there's spaghetti on his fork, and then when it cuts back to him, the spaghetti is in a different place, and then it cuts back, and there's no spaghetti, and then there is spaghetti. So
Was she on that one too?
no,
Oh,
but that's just bad
Because
continuity.
she wasn't.
That's
If
'cause she
she'd
wasn't,
been
you're
on
right.
it,
But
that
the
spaghetti
funny
would
thing
have been
about
spot
it,
on.
I've had people say, they make that into a positive. Say, I like the way you made the spaghetti move like a worm.
Yeah,
I said, yeah, well, you know.
That's a good
we have a
idea.
genius.
Much words like that.
It was all to get laid.
That should be the name of this episode.
all to get laid.
Yeah.
It's all to get laid.
Yeah, but that's the species we have. You know,
Wow,
come on.
I
Why do
really
you think-
need. Maybe that needs
Sorry
to
to break it to
motivate
you,
me
Becca.
more.
Why-
I'm sorry, guys. I already knew it. You learn that when you're like 16, that every single thing a guy says to you in high school is purely in that sense.
Remember that
And
time
then it
day we
just
said, "Hey,
continues.
Becca, want to do a podcast with us?"
That was it. That was your only
Did you have to
motivation.
learn it? Did you have to actually learn that in the field, like with guys? Or I have two daughters. I told them if their lips are
Yeah.
moving, they're lying.
Because
Yeah.
you assume they're not, because you like these guys.
I
It's
understand.
like, there was like my very first crush, you want to assume that they're not doing that
we
they
kn-
totally are into
We
you.
know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And there's the guy, there's a douche, but there's so many approaches, but they all
Right.
want the same. We wouldn't be here. As
Exactly.
Right,
species.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
like-
So there's a guy who's into poetry.
Yeah.
He's not really interested in sex. Maybe someday, 12 years. That's a tactic.
Wrote a song
Yeah.
for me
He
on his
gets laid
guitar.
faster than the guitar
Yeah.
than there's the sensitive musician.
love this.
Exactly. I dated a lot of sensitive musicians. I always fell for that one though, every single time. And no. And now that I have a daughter, I'm sure that I'm going to give her a lecture on, okay, no matter how much poetry they read you and things like that.
When guys would
Yeah.
come to the door, when my older daughter, it was the first date, the guy comes to the door, she said to me, guys don't like to come to the house. I said, good. Like they're afraid. No, she said, they're afraid of you. And I said, good. I didn't it's just, I must have made a face.
Yeah.
Like if you do anything, I will kill you. And
Gotta learn that.
And yeah, I mean, it was just natural because I know the guy. Because I was the guy.
Yeah. You still are. Everyone's
I
still
still
a guy.
am.
You
Yeah, I
can't
still
change
am.
it. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, what's your angle? I'm just looking for the angle because it's got to be an angle. It's just if I can identify, he's got a new angle.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
No, there's something chemical that happens in the female brain. And actually, I'm sure it's actually like endorphins or something like that.
Yeah, but otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, you're swooning and you're reading me poetry
Yeah.
and my brain gets completely foggy and then I'm suddenly like lovey-eyed
If it
and
wasn't for that-
missing the attempts.
If it wasn't for that endorphin excretion, all women would be lesbians and the species would die
Yeah.
off.
It's
and that would be the
probably
end of
true,
it.
guys. I hate to say it. But
Everybody has an inner asshole. Every guy. And you just have to discover it. You have to find it, search it out.
You need a dating podcast.
Yeah.
No, like,
You
that would be
should do
cool.
it.
That like
dating advice.
segue into like now we're going to take calls. My boyfriend, he just took the words right out of my mouth.
I've got it. It's going to be you and Sybil Danning, and it's a dating show.
Yeah.
Her name will be at top.
Yeah,
Top of the podcast.
No, I'm sorry.
Last year we were doing this big Valentine's thing on the Fango website, and I don't even Mike or Chris or Sam or somebody, and I was like, let me do a column about dating in the horror world, and they were like, yeah, Becca, but you're not like really a girl, and you're bitter, and I was like, that doesn't no. So
They know you well.
By the way, I knew him from Tim League, that I met at the same place that I got the financing for Satan's Little Helper. But subsequently, I got more and more close to Tim when he opened these draft houses. He told me about the original one. I never went down there. And I knew that he was making more, but he built one in Yonkers.
Oh, that's right.
And so I emailed him. I said, Tim, that's like 20 minutes from my house. I know the theater that he gutted and all of that. I said, let's show, he says, show Squirm at the first opening week, 35 millimeter. And we did. And then we showed Satan's Little Helper last Halloween. And Tim would fly out to do, because we do a great act. It's like vaudeville. And then so his company, Mondo, Mondo?
Yep.
So they decided they wanted to do Blue Sunshine.
The vinyl, the record,
yeah,
right? The
and so
soundtrack.
they wanted to do a vinyl record of the soundtrack. And I said, why? Like, kids are into vinyl, but it's coming from digital to analog. That's not what analog is, But anyway, they designed a. Did you see the artwork?
He bought it.
It's gorgeous.
We were in Texas. I remember he bought it.
Yeah,
it's killer.
Yeah, that's right.
It's absolutely and a great poster, And so Tim says, you come. So I went to Austin last February, stayed at his house, and the theater was filled up, and they showed Blue Sunshine 35 and signed all these things. And again, it's like these things have a life. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
Well, I think that film will always have a life because it's really hard to categorize. You can't just pin it down, and it's not a horror film. It's not a cult film.
But it's a time capsule of that particular transitional time. It's always, if you're going to find an interesting time, it's always when something is becoming something else.
Right, because you're also going to disco and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, the disco thing is, it was so fresh at that time. Saturday Night Fever hadn't come out. I knew about discos from New York. When I came out to California to shoot the movie, people said, discos, like in Europe? They didn't know what I was talking about. So I literally had to say what it was and find a place, and all the bars had sawdust. The girls, the guy, everybody had jeans, long. It was still a carryover of the 60s.
Yeah.
And everybody drank beer. Nobody drank hard booze. And back in New York, the guys are wearing sport jackets, and the girls are dolled up with skirts and stockings, like going back to almost like the 50s, and dancing the hustle and all the shit. And I was like, how am I going to do this? We got extras. They didn't own a dress. And we couldn't afford, like, they get their mother's dress, because we had costume everybody, cleaned out all the sawdust, put a disco ball in, built that plexiglass thing. It was all from this country western bar.
Weird. So
then I get back to New York, and my agent calls me, and he says, there was an article in the New Yorker or New York Magazine called Saturday Night Forever. Right? It was an article about a guy that worked in a hardware store, and then he danced disco at night. And this is another, like, not only my bad casting, but I'm just total asshole across the board. But so he says they're looking for a director. This guy named Kevin McCormick, and it's going to be Robert Stigwood, because the Bee Gees. I go, Bee Gees, they suck. That's number one. So he goes, well, you should talk to these guys because it's a disco theme. And in reality, I had the only disco scene
in a movie.
It's a horror movie, all that. But who has a disco scene at that point? It hadn't broken yet. It didn't exist. Wow. So I had one. So this guy, Kevin McCormick, calls me. And I had a rough cut. I could have shown it to him. So he says, we're shooting whatever, the time. And he says, the budget and all this stuff. And he says, we already have the music laid out for the whole movie. I said, what? It was like, he's 26. He's like, I was 29. I said, or maybe he was really young. Maybe he was 24. Yeah. And I said, that's not how you make a movie. You don't have the music and make the movie to the music. And I said, animation. I was taking him to school without even meeting him. And I'm saying, you do the movie, then you score it. He goes, yeah, but we have these Bee Gees. And I'm thinking, Bee Gees? Yeah, come on. He said to my agent, I don't think this is going to work. He didn't even meet with me. I knew a lot of guys that worked on the crew. So there's one guy, Stewie Adlowitz. I said, you working on that Saturday Night Forever? He says, no, they're calling it Saturday Night Fever. They changed it. I said, yeah. And I said, how's it? He says, it's unbelievable. He says, guys are carrying sandbags and dancing to the music between takes.
Oh, that's cool.
I said, you mean the music that he said, yeah, they blast the music during the thing. And everybody's so contagious. I went, wah, wah.
Wow. Saturday Night Fever almost was.
Yeah. That's why you never heard of me.
Well, we have to wrap it up. We have another show coming in. But I want to thank Jeff Lieberman, who had a small pocket of time in town to come and join us. We really appreciate it. We wanted you on. Our listeners wanted you on. So we're glad you did it. And if you're listening to this and you're in LA, he's going to be signing at Dark Delicacies on Saturday at 2 p.m.
Copies of Squirm. You know who? Here's a news. I was just with Donnie Scardino at Warner Bros. And he's probably gonna come.
Oh, cool! Star of Squirm.
I said, yeah, come on, you don't have to go. And because he brought it up, I didn't ask him. And he says, yeah, well, they contacted me. He said, I'm busy. And he said, you're going to be there? Maybe I'll bring my kid and come over. Yeah. So that would be fun.
He should.
Tony Todd.
Tony Todd will be there. Yeah.
I'll kick his ass.
So yeah, if you're in town, go see them at Dark Delicacies Saturday at 2. And we'll do a proper catch-up next week for next week's episodes about the break and all that.
So much stuff I need to talk about.
But yeah, Jeff was in town. I really wanted to squeeze this episode in. So thank you so much again, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.